Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is Nana Jumpy, ED of BAJI, and so looking forward to begin this lovely and very important webinar. Thank you so very much for joining. If at any point during this presentation you have any questions or any comments, please feel free to liberally use the question and answer in the chat to be able to be in contact with us. We are expecting this to be a very lively conversation, and we're hoping that you are able to get in well, hear well, and share your thoughts with us. So thank you very much for joining, and we're going to get started in about 30 seconds. Thank you so very much. So, welcome everyone to the Black Alliance for Just Immigration's National Voter Registration Day webinar. We want to thank you again for joining us as we are engaging our communities in this critical year at this critical time in this nation's history. And we're ensuring that our communities are completing the census. There's still time, and we'll be talking about that more before what is right now a September 30th deadline. They're in court this very minute, and BAJI's a plaintiff on that case, so you'll probably hear live and in person what that decision actually is, but also talking about voting and registering to vote, supporting those folks who can vote, and making sure that people vote in this 2020 election and beyond. We are so pleased to have with us strong, brilliant sisters who are going to be walking us through the conversation of how we engage the census, how we engage our voting rights, how we support those who are engaging their voting rights, and what we need to do. And so we have with us Janine Abrams McLean of Fair Count. We have Inse Ufot, Board Member, Executive Director of New Georgia Project. We have Mena Demesi, Vice President of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, and Neka Achapu BAJI, National Census and Civic Engagement Coordinator. So let me start by giving introductions, because I always believe that we should make sure that sisters get their due. Often doesn't happen, so we got to make sure it happens. Dr. Janine Abrams McLean is the Vice President at Fair Count, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization founded by Stacey Abrams, her sister. The goal of Fair Count is to facilitate and ensure a fair and accurate census while building pathways to continued civic engagement. Janine is a highly skilled researcher and is passionate about finding creative ways to tackle community-based issues using both strategic planning and innovative ideas. Thank you so very much for joining us, Janine. Dr. Mena Demesi is a Senior Vice President at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. She heads the foundation's research and policy initiatives that affect African Americans and the global Black community in areas including education, criminal justice, economic opportunity, voting, and environmental sustainability, among many others. In her capacity, Dr. Demesi has spearheaded several partnerships with the White House, Congress, the Anne E. Casey Foundation, and other nonprofit stakeholders to advance strategic efforts to influence and inform public policy. Thank you for joining us, Sister Mena. Inse Ufot is a BAJI board member and the Chief Executive Officer of the New Georgia Project and its affiliate, New Georgia Project Action Fund. Inse leads both organizations with a data-informed approach and a commitment to developing tools that leverage technology with the goal of making it easier in every election. Inse and her team are also developing Georgia's homegrown talent by training and organizing local activists across the state. She has dedicated her life and career to working on civil, human, and workers' rights issues and leads 2 organizations whose complementary aim is to strengthen Georgia's democracy. Under NSA's leadership, New Georgia Project has registered nearly 425,000 Georgians, just Georgians, to vote. Neka Chapu is BAJI's Census and Civic Engagement Coordinator. She is the founder of the U.S. Bilateral African Chamber of Commerce, a nonprofit focused on increasing bilateral trade and investment between the United States and Africa. She is also the founder of the African Public Affairs Committee, AFRIPAC, an organization that advocates for the empowerment of diaspora Africans through civic engagement and their inclusion in the political system. She's been very active in the African community and has served on the boards of World Refugee Day, Discovery Green Park, AfriPro, and as the Africa Subcommittee Chair for the International Greater Houston Partnership and the Houston Trade Development Council. So Janine, let's start by getting into the census. We know that the census is important to our communities. BAJI has been working with Fair Count since last year to ensure that all Black people, including Black immigrants and refugees and our families, are counted in the 2020 census. Just last month, we partnered to make videos in Jamaican patois and Ewe and Ga and Brazilian Portuguese, French, making sure, Tigreña, Amharic, making sure that our communities know about the need to count in all languages. And so as we look now from the ongoing pandemic to the protests in the streets against police violence, the fires in California, and the fight for voting rights, really, it's clear that resources and representation are important to our community, but please let's talk and give us some information again on why it's so important for Black immigrants to remember and to act towards being counted in this census.
First, I just want to thank you, Nana, for having me here today. I'm so excited to be here with this group of phenomenal women to talk about everything that we need to basically to harness our power for this year and the next decade to come. As you know, like you said, we've been working to make sure that Black immigrants and Black people in general are counted in the census. The census will direct $1.5 trillion in federal funding to communities that are made up of Black citizens and Black immigrants. It doesn't matter. The census counts every single person. I had the chance to work with the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation with Minna to do an entire project called Black America Counts, where we lay out what is at stake for every single state in this country if Black people are undercounted. And so I encourage everybody to go there to see what it means for your community if we are undercounted. The Urban Institute last year, before the pandemic hit, they predicted that this would be the worst undercount for Black and Hispanic communities that we have seen in the past 30 years. And that was before a pandemic started to disproportionately impact Black communities across this country. And so we need to make sure that as we recover, and I'll just say that before starting Fair Count, I worked at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And I feel comfortable and confident, unfortunately, in saying that even when we do get a vaccine, the recovery from this pandemic is going to go well into 2021. And we can't get the resources that we need to recover over the next decade if we aren't counted today. And so all the money that goes for, and you mentioned the fires that are happening in California, if that happens next year, all the funds are going to be based on the number of people that are counted. The hurricanes that are ravaging the Southeast right now, if that happens again because of climate change next year, that money will be determined based on how many people are counted. And what folks need to know is that when communities that are historically undercounted, like the Black community, when we are undercounted, the money doesn't disappear. It goes to communities that have been counted. So you're paying your taxes, expecting to get your return, but when you're not counted, that money goes to communities that have been counted, and some of them that have been overcounted. We know that white homeowners were overcounted in the last census. So not only are other communities getting their fair share of the resources and political power, they're getting yours too. And so you need to make sure that you are counted so that our communities can thrive, so that we can have thriving local economies, schools that aren't overcrowded once we get back into school, so that we can have safety net programs for people that need them. This is how we get it done right now, and making sure that by making sure we are counted. And I know this is National Voter Registration Day, and I know NSA is gonna, do her thing, but I'm gonna tell you this right now, the census isn't sexy, right? It's not sexy, nobody's, all excited about the census, but it is the bedrock of our democracy. If we do not get the census right, our communities will lose out over the next decade on money and political power. So we can do what we need to do and show up in November, but if we aren't counted before September 30th, then our power over the next decade is going to be stripped from us, and we will not have another chance to get it back for 10 years. Uh-oh, did Nana freeze for other people? All right. Well, another thing, because I know what she's going to ask me, is why, there she is. Hey, Nana, you're back.
Sorry for that. I don't know what that was. You see, they're trying to stop us. They can't stop. We will be victorious.
Ain't go back to Russia.
So let's talk about what's happening right now, because right now, I know me, just in my apartment complex, the enumerators have come by 25,000 times a day. And people are really scared, especially Black immigrants, and other Black folks. We're not necessarily so into people getting our information anyway, and having the doors knocked on, and having people not listening when we're saying, hey, we don't want to come to the door, is really scary. How can people operate right now to keep the enumerators from coming to their door, or at least to have something to say to have the enumerators go away if they come to their door?
All right. So two things. First thing I'll say is that the census is safe. I can learn more about people, I can learn more about you by doing a thorough Google search or going on your social media pages. So the census is safe. Your data kept private for 72 years. Enumerators are going around now. They are going to households that have not been counted. And some of the times when they knock on your door, even if you have done the census, they may be asking you about your neighbor because they haven't responded and they're not answering the door. So just to let you know that that enumerators, that's why you're getting a lot of knocks. However, the way that you can feel relatively comfortable not answering the door when they knock on your door is by filling the census out yourself, because until you answer, they're going to keep knocking. They're going to keep asking your neighbors who lives in your house. So if you go ahead and fill it out, you can do it at my2020census.gov, or you can call 1-844-330-2020 and do it over the phone. And you can do it in multiple languages. The last thing I'll say, and this is something that Fair Count is doing because of what's going on in Georgia. In Georgia and across the country, the Census Bureau, because the census was supposed to end on July 31st, they extended it until October 31st. And then because of some shenanigans, tomfoolery, whatever word you want to use, in August, they did an about face and said, hey, guess what? We can get it done a month earlier, even though we have the lowest response rates that we've ever seen, and we're in the middle of a pandemic. And so the people that are being hurt and that are going to be hurt by the shortening of this time frame are communities of color. And so we need to make sure that we can go ahead and get counted. And in Georgia, we have one of the lowest performing area census offices. So these are the enumerators that are going out to count people. We have one area census office that covers 60 counties, and NSA knows in Middle and South Georgia covers 60 counties, one office that is supposed to cover all of those people, and they're not doing the best job. And so what we've started doing at Fair Count is we've started doing patch through calls. where we essentially call people. We have Stacy, my sister Stacy, do a robocall. She says, hey, they ain't coming. Go ahead, we're gonna call you tomorrow. You know, she's much more eloquent than that. But they ain't coming. We're gonna call you tomorrow. You pick up the phone and we will patch you straight through to the Census Bureau so you can fill it out over the phone. And so if you are in Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina, North Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, New Mexico, or Nevada, you will be getting patched through calls from Fair Count. If you are African American or Black, we are calling all of y'all to tell you to pick up the phone and let us patch you through. So if you get a call from an unknown number, it's probably us trying to get you to do the census. So please, please, please do the census so that we can maintain our power and our and the resources that we need, that we can get them, and it'll help you feel better about not answering the door when somebody comes. I hope that answered the question, Nana.
And answered it wonderfully. Thank you so very much. We need folks to know, you know, a census a day keeps the enumerator away, right? So make sure that you get that in, that you go online, and there's other means of getting on. We're going to let Janine give us that at the end of this hour, but just want to make sure that people know there is something you can do. Sister Mena, when we think about immigration, we know that immigration policy is federal policy, that we're talking about what's happening either as executive orders through the administration or through Congress. We also, of course, have things happening on the state and local level that also impact immigrants. But taking it for now at the federal level, what are the categories of decisions that are made by federal elected officials like the president, Congress, that impact Black migrants? And why is it so important that not just eligible voters, right, histories, but that folks who are not eligible, maybe because whether they're migrants, maybe it's because they have they're on parole or they have some other type of restriction right now. Why is it important for all of us to be really interested in making sure this vote?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And again, always an honor to be on a panel with brilliant sisters. Let me, before answering that question, also just set the context here, right? Because oftentimes our communities get marginalized within marginalized group of people, right? So in the context of this social justice movement, what we're witnessing across the country is an opportunity for, you know, Black and brown people to stand up, put pressure on the government and say, you know, we deserve to be represented, we deserve to be protected and served by our elected officials and by law enforcement. And that includes African immigrants. It includes, you know, when we talk about criminal justice, you can talk about it at an executive level. You know, I'll tell you more about a young Gambian brother named Ousmane Darboe in New York, who is continues to be detained by ICE, even though he has been pardoned by the governor of New York. You know, there are all kinds of layers when it comes to justice for Black immigrants. And I'm happy I'm going after Dr. Janine Abrams-McClain, because the census is important. So for political scientists and for those of us who do this work that look at the data to back our claims on why our communities matter, we have to be able to look at the census and make sure we're accurately counted. We know it's hard enough. If you're Black, it's also hard if you're Black, right, and you're immigrant, right? But we have seen power across the board. We've seen an increase in voter turnout rates among Black immigrants. In fact, from 2000 to 2018, the number of African and Caribbean immigrants rose by 30%. We're around, I guess, 4.3 million. But when we look at voter turnout rates, Black immigrant voters show up, and they show up actually in higher rates than their Hispanic, Asian, and white counterparts. And so we need to remember that, this is not rocket science, right? But also tell the stories of the work that's being done by organizations like BAJI and others that are out there facing these issues. When it comes to, federal policy, I mean, we're looking at a number of things, right? We're talking about, fighting for permanent status for holders of temporary protected status, which continues to be debated. And in the midst of an administration that prioritizes a militaristic approach pretty much to its policies, it's not like, we need to be true to its name, temporary protected status, right? Black immigrants want the same thing everybody else does: a good paying job, safety and security, ability to take care of their loved ones and family, right? Equitable access to healthcare, right? We want, you know, the community, Black immigrants want the same thing. The diaspora wants the same thing, but there is an added layer here because part of that struggle is wrapped up in citizenship status. It's wrapped up in the dual penalties in the criminal justice system for people like Ousmane Darboe, who is being unlawfully detained in the state of New York due to the Trump administration's enforcement of really, you know, federal priorities overstepping their bounds, not because they have to, but because the administration wants to. You know, the issues of diversity visas, which we know was actually initially created to increase immigration from sort of low rates of migrants from European communities, happens to be quite beneficial for African immigrants, right? And we see that on the chopping block in the discussion around comprehensive immigration reform. And so the question is, you know, how are we going to stand up and fight this? And then, you know, language access barriers. You know, the criminal justice system is another, and some of the what we're facing here is also, it's not just with regard to the past 4 years, right? I mean, we can go back to the 90s when you're looking at the Anti-Terrorism and Death Penalty Act under the Clinton administration, which effectively started to bring about a more sort of punitive approach to criminal justice reform. And so when you're talking about young people like Ousmane Darboe, where the state's protecting him, but the federal government isn't, that's a problem. Because work is being done. People are out on the streets, right? There is the backing actually of senators in the United States Congress that have you know, been there to protect and sort of call for his release, but it hasn't helped. And we know that laws are being manipulated. So we just need to understand the importance of coalition building, understand that there's also a state and local level I can talk about in a moment. But let's not forget that this social justice movement, this Black Lives Matter movement, is about us. It's about us, and it's about intersectionality. It's about the fact that, you know, whether you go back to Rodney King in 94, we're talking about Abnu Larima in 97, we're talking about Amadou Diallo in 1999, the same challenges face us. But when it comes to citizenship status, there's a whole nother layer of access to language rights. And a lot of it is an information gap. And so we need the census data to make the case at a state and local level for why over 300 federal programs that reallocate these billions of dollars that Janine is talking about actually gets funneled to the Black immigrant communities across the country that need them.
Thank you so very much. And when we go round again, I want to talk to you or see if you can tell us something about this increase in representation in Congress by Black immigrants, right? Folks who have Black folks that have migrant backgrounds, and what that is meaning to what we're seeing now in Congress and the policies that we're seeing happen on the federal level. Speaking with INSEE, I want to talk about what's happening and what we're working on with respect to voter registration and voter suppression. Can you share that with us? Voter registration, voter suppression. We know that our folks need to get registered, but we also know that voter suppression is very real. And so what are we doing? What can be done? Give us a little bit of the history between building Black electoral power in this country and the efforts to suppress our vote. I guess it's not history, it's happening now. Start with that. And then let's talk about what are the ways that we are pushing back, and how do we push back if we see it happening?
Right, okay. Well, I won't bore you because the truth is that many of you know that America has a long and a recent history of voter suppression. And, you know, there are a number of reasons that have been identified, but we can start with the idea that this particular form of democracy, our democratic republic, did not envision a world where Black people, where women, where people who didn't own property had a say in you know, how we spend our money and how we set policy. Originally, the people who were eligible to vote in this country were white males who owned land. And it has been a fight ever since to build a bigger we in the we the people, to build a broader us, right? In terms of, again, race and gender and class and national origin. So one, we are overcoming the original sin of America, and it has been an uphill battle ever since. So that's our long history. When I think about our recent history, I can go back just 7 years to Shelby versus Holder, which was a Supreme Court case that basically kicked the teeth and then two-stepped all over the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Shelby versus Holder then ushered in a sort of mad dash of Southern states, but then eventually states across the country to usher in voter ID laws and all of these things that appeared sort of race neutral on its face, but that were designed to shrink the electorate and to make it more difficult for us to have sort of full, robust participation in our elections, not just full participation from people of color, but it went after young people, it went after seniors, it went after women and femmes and people who have to change their names. And so again, we have been working overtime to sort of neutralize the impact of those attacks on our democracy and on our system. And we also were founded by Leader Abrams. And I think it's important, I will forever give her props for seeing this as a tactic from jump. So the idea is that voter registration, year-round voter registration, if we can change the culture of voter registration and change the culture of elections, that we can build super voters out of new Americans, people who are new to the process. So, excuse me while I vomit in my mouth, and flag that the people who are going to be voting for the first time were born in this election, were born in 2002. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, I think that, aggressive voter suppression, strategic, it at its core is a tactic. Like the census, it is not sexy. It is every year, every 4 years, when there is a highly contested presidential election, then folks are reminded that we need to register to vote so that we can participate in the presidential elections. But it's often framed in the context of a popularity contest, right? That there is an extraordinary amount of money that is spent on ads just to reduce it to, a choice that who we would like to have a beer with. And what I know, and what New Georgia Project knows, and what BAJI knows, and all the folks on this call, is that what is at stake is much more than who we would rather have a beer with, right? That our lives are literally on the line. And I'm talking about from extreme weather events and ignoring the science of climate change, and so people's literal homes burning down. We are in the middle of hurricane season, and this is a historic hurricane season, given the number and size and intensity of the storms that we've seen. I'm talking about state violence, right? And I'm not just talking about police shooting unarmed people, but I'm also talking about ICE detention centers and the doctors that work from them, removing people's wombs without their permission in these United States in the year of our Lord 2020. And here's the thing, police in most of our cities and counties, it's not the president that determines their budget, that negotiates with the police unions. It's city council and mayors, right? So registering people to vote, introducing new Americans as well as young people to the power of the vote is super important. And why we are seeing an aggressive uptick in voter registration, voter suppression, is because people are tapping into their power. If there is a silver lining to be found in this moment of quarantine, is that folks have had an opportunity to slow down and connect the dots, and also recognize how vulnerable we are, and also recognize that I need to find a political home. I need to make sure that all the people in my life who are eligible to vote are registered, because they are trying to kill us. And that I know that we can be better. I am an immigrant. I came to this country with my family when we were young. There's a song that got super popular like before I was born, and it's like, come and see America one day. I'm not gonna sing it. But what I will say is that there's a narrative about America being the land of the free, and a place for opportunity. And I think that there is a role for new Americans, Black immigrants, to play. And this is the time for us to get in position, because our fortunes, our futures, the futures of our children are linked together, are tied together. There's no wall that you can build to prevent climate change from having an impact on you and your children. And so we need to elect leaders who not only know what our community's priorities are, but who are accountable to us and our communities. And that is why we do the hard work of trying to make unsexy voter registration fun and interesting, and something that people can engage in year round. It is a part of the work that we do. And I would argue that for all of us who are thinking about policy and politics and how they play together, that voter registration on some level should be included as a part of your outreach efforts.
Thank you so very much, Insay. So important for us to understand that, if it didn't mean anything, they wouldn't be trying to keep us from doing it, right? And so, it's not revolution, but elections have consequences, and they have consequences for Black folks in general, our entire communities, including Black immigrants. And I want to thank you, Insay, for talking about, how we need to get ourselves into position. And so, Neka, bring us home on this National Voter Registration Day in terms of what we do next. So we're talking about new Americans. We're talking about folks who are not new Americans, who are not citizens, who are Black migrants, but who still are being affected by what's happening. First, what's our ask today of Black immigrants who are eligible to vote, who may be new Americans or not so new Americans? What's our ask of them today? And then those folks who aren't eligible to vote, what can they do to make sure that we are able to flex our electoral power?
Well, thank you so much. Oops. Thank you so much, Nana. Here at the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, we've been engaging our Black immigrant communities to continue organizing and advocating for racial, social, and economic justice for African Americans and Black immigrant communities. We have been providing at the local level and at the national level trainings, technical assistance for organizations, and we are partnering to develop our community's skills in terms of knowing when to get registered to vote, and in addition to sensibilizing our community on the importance of filling out the census. As far as harnessing our vote and harnessing the power of our voices in this very contested election, we are directing our community members to visit the website iwillvote.com, where you can find out about your registration, whether you can still obtain absentee ballot. It is getting kind of late for that, but we're gonna keep pushing people to get registered to vote, to fill out the census, and continue participating in this very important part of the year. And the other thing that I was going to mention is that, yes, presidential elections, but as we mentioned earlier, all politics is local. So not just focus on election day, right? Focus also on the local elections that are happening after the presidential elections, because that's also where we are needed. Voting is not just in November, but it's cyclical, right? So we are going to engage our communities to log on to iwillvote.com. Here at BAJI, we've done a lot of work in terms of connecting to our communities. I know someone mentioned earlier that we've been doing videos. We've been doing a lot of social media. Last week, we were on the campus of Texas Southern University, one of the biggest HBCUs here in Houston, Texas. And we went to register folks to vote and make sure that folks are signed up for the census. So we're going to continue that work up until September 30th, because we really need to engage and ensure that our communities are apprised of what's going on.
Thank you so very much. And, a lot of times people ask and say, I have family, most of us have family, what we would call mixed status families. So some folks are citizens and some folks aren't. And it's like, okay, what can I do? I can't vote. And you can direct folks to the resources that Nneka has pointed out. But also, look, these lines in some places are already, even for early voting, 2 to 3 hours. And so we know that, it doesn't hurt to have a ginger beer and a patty in your hand as you're standing at that line. And so as your church groups, as your groups out of the mosque, as your social groups, Ghana Association of Southern California, right? Grab some snacks, get some water in places where you're able to stand in line for people for an hour, make up, get those young legs from Texas Southern and other places to stand in line for some of the elders and others not so elder who may not want to stand in line for 6 hours. Do whatever it is that you can do to be able to make that happen so that we can support each other, right? Because we all have a role to play. So quickly, folks, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, please put those in our question slot. Put your comments in the chat. Manuela will be reading the questions for our folks to be able to respond to. I want to just do like a last round, getting some additional pieces in the next 5 minutes or so. So Janine, where do people go? We talked about go, fill this out, get this census online. And I'm gonna be checking my phone here. If you see me looking down, I'm trying to see if the decision has come out. But where do people go? How do people connect up with the census if they wanna do so outside of the enumerator?
Yes, so this has been a fabulous conversation. And I think the first thing people can do, if you're, for those of you who are watching this online, you will obviously have internet, go to my2020census.gov. And it takes less than 10 minutes to do, unless you have a family. I'm from a family of 8, and I bet I could do my whole family in less than 10 minutes. So unless you have a humongous family, it should take you less than 10 minutes to fill it out online. Again, you can also call 1-844-330-2020 or wait for somebody to call you to patch you through if you're in the states that I mentioned. And you can do it online, and they do have people there to help do it in different languages. And the same thing online. The online version is in, I think, 12 different languages. And then if you don't want to do either one of those, you can go through your junk mail and look and see if you can find the paper form that the Census Bureau sent. And if you can find that, you can fill it out and put it in the mail. As of right now, the deadline is September 30th, but the Census Bureau has said that they will accept the paper forms that are postmarked, I think, or up till October 7th. And I'm gonna say one more thing, Nana, just so people know what's at stake. So when I said earlier that by rushing the census that Black and Brown or communities of color were being disproportionately impacted, when we don't fill it out on our own, when we don't answer the door for the enumerator, then what happens is the Census Bureau starts doing things like by proxy interviews. So that's where they are knocking on your door, asking your neighbor who lives in your house, or asking you who lives in your neighbor's house. So that's one way that they try and fill it in. They also use administrative records. So if you have received any sort of government assistance, or there's a form out there that has some information about your household and the possible makeup of it, then they will use that to figure out who lives in your home. And then the last thing that they do, once they can't do that, they go to a process called statistical imputation, where they look at the people that have replied to the census surrounding you, surrounding your home, and they say, well, most of the people that filled it out look like this, so we're going to impute or statistically guess who lives in your home. Now, if you listened earlier, I told you that white homeowners were overcounted in the last census. And we know that at the end of July, Black census tracts that were predominantly Black were trailing those that were predominantly white in self-response rates by nearly 15%. So we weren't responding as much. So if you're in a gentrified area and all the white people around you have already responded to the census, and you don't do it on your own, your neighbor, you don't answer the door when the census taker comes by, your neighbor doesn't tell them who lives there, you don't have any administrative records, then what the Census Bureau will do is say, well, looks like all these white families of four that have responded to the census, based on this information, we're going to impute that Janine's Black family of four is now a white family of four. And what ends up happening is that people of color get disappeared, all right? And we can't have that, because everything that we're talking about, redistricting, voting, all of that is we have to have an accurate picture of the demographics of our communities. And so by not responding, you also run the risk of being disappeared or reassigned, and potentially making this country whiter and less diverse than it actually is. So please, I am begging you, fill out the census and then tell 5, 10, 12 other people to do it. Help them do it. And just please, we have got to get counted, and we're running out of time.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much for that plea. I want to go back to Mena and Inse, just to talk about on this National Voter Registration Day, like the importance of making sure that those of us who can vote, vote. And again, don't have much time, but I want to make sure to get it in. Mena, we see like this increase in our presence in Congress. People may not know because the names are, you know, Yvette Clarke, and so they see Yvette Clarke, and if they don't know who that is, then they decide that this, you know, the name doesn't sound like not a jumpy, so this must not be a Black person, right? Representative Horsford, or, you know, as well as, of course, folks like Representative Omar, Representative Neguse, and others. So tell us what that has meant to our community, and what it means to our community to have us actually sitting there at the table.
Yeah, briefly. So, you know, it's representation matters. It's powerful, right? I mean, I recall the days when I was doing my dissertation at the University of Michigan and was told that I can't focus on voting rates of Black immigrants because they are statistically insignificant, was the word used. And so but I knew they mattered because I'm one of them, and I see my community making a difference, right? So as we see people like Assemblyman Alexander Asefa in Nevada, first Ethiopian American state legislator, Congressman Joe Neguse from Colorado, Eritrean Americans, first Black member of Congress from Colorado, right? Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, first Black Muslim female, right? I mean, representation matters, and it matters, like, it's not just because of diversity for diversity's sake. These people understand our communities. That's why it's important that Congress reflects the nation. So when policies are created, there is there's a better policy, right? Because it addresses the nuances and the specific challenges that immigrant families and their children face. So, and I should mention, I mean, I'm from living in Maryland, so Council Member Will Jawando, right? I mean, we see, so what Obama has done was in many ways made visible a lot of our communities in ways that had never been known before, I guess, to those who don't consider our numbers, you know, powerful, or don't really understand what it means to be a Black immigrant or part of the African diaspora. But there's strength in numbers. And so it's going to be really important that we take advantage of that. And not all the onus is on African members of Congress either, right? The goal is that we understand our allies, right? So you have folks like Congressman Neguse, who started a bipartisan congressional caucus on refugees. That matters, right? You have people like Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, Jamaican American, who started the immigrant CBC task force. That's why it matters, representation. But on top of that, you know, we know where our communities reside. We're in big states like Maryland, Texas, Virginia, California, New York. And so we need to go, like everyone else has been talking, state and local, right? Know who your chief of police is, know who your mayor is. In the District of Columbia, a lot of us a long time ago, when the late great Marion Barry created the African Committee Council within the DC City Council, it didn't have funding, but the Asian and Latino counterparts did. So as Africans, we got together and we said, something's off here. How come the African Council doesn't have independent grant-making authority? We lobbied, we hit up every city council member, and now they have funding. Why? Because the immigrant community plays a large role in the economic output of the nation's capital. And this is the case across the country. So when it comes to benefits that many Black immigrants actually pay into but don't benefit from, we need to know that we have an equal right like anyone else to SNAP, WIC, Section 8 housing, right? All of these things that everyone else cares about, we care about it, but we also deserve it.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And Inse, we know that Black immigrants, you ain't the only one in Georgia, that there are plenty. We have
we out here.
There.
We out here. Listen, if it's roti or ackee and saltfish, if it's fufu, like we recognize the sort of the diversity, the depth, the breadth of the African and Caribbean, of the African diaspora. Listen, I tell people that I am an African American with an equal emphasis on both. When I became a US citizen, shout out to my mom, who got a second job so she could pay our attorney. I, was responsible for making sure that she didn't embarrass me and that we both passed the citizenship exam. And the idea is that I swore an oath of allegiance to this country to defend the Constitution and the country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And so I take my rights and my responsibilities as a citizen very seriously. And I might be annoying, but I'm very much a patriot. And so as someone who is here, who's here to stay, who's not going anywhere, and who wants to have a full life of love and power, where and self-determination, I understand that I must vote, and I must vote in every election. And for anyone under the sound of my voice who agrees, we already know that you're going to go register, that you've registered to vote already, and that you're going to go out and vote. And so now we are asking you on this National Voter Registration Day to check into the Auntie group chat and make sure that all of the folks who've crossed the citizenship threshold have a plan to go vote on election day. That's absolutely important, because again, if you're on this stream, then you're more than likely at the place where you're doing what you need to do. But one of the things that our research has found is that having people sort of walk through the steps in their mind, okay, I think I'm gonna vote early and in person. I'm a little concerned, we're a little close to the absentee ballot deadline, or I got my ballot, it's on my kitchen table. Let me stop playing and fill it out. Whatever it is, walking your people through a plan and checking in with the group chat to make sure that you and your people are counted in that number when we decide on January 20, 2021, who the next president of the United States is and when they get inaugurated.
Absolutely. Get on that WhatsApp chat, the same one they were using to pass all kind of COVID misinformation. About using the blow dryer to kill the virus in the back of your throat. Get on that chat, whether you are a citizen or not, and make sure that you're letting people know who are eligible. Hey, vote, register, and get out there, and then make sure you're supporting folks who are voting once they get out there. Neka, as you described, BAJI's doing a lot of work. We have other partners that are doing a lot of work. If folks want to volunteer, if they want to be one in that number when the Saints go marching in, helping out with the effort to get people to be counted in the census and also registered and voting, where do they go? How do they connect up with you?
Absolutely. They can connect with me at census@baji.org. And another thing that I wanted to mention, as far as folks who are not eligible to vote at this time, as you mentioned earlier, you can still play a supporting role. You can still be part of this. You can still phone bank, you can still text bank, you can still drive somebody to the polls who doesn't have a ride. I know that there's a lot of elderly folks that are trying to figure out, if they're not doing absentee voting, how are they going to get there? Well, here's the chance for folks that are not going to be able to vote to actually do something. So one, do make a vote plan, like we all said. And to get in touch with me, just email census@baji.org or visit our website, which has a lot of information. I would want to take 1 second to appreciate all the work that all our associates have done, from Texas all the way to California to Florida. We've had some wonderful young folks and not so young help us in getting the word out about both the census and voter registration. So I want to encourage people that feel like, I'm not eligible to vote, what can I do? Yes, you can do something. Yes, you can make phone calls to remind those who can vote to vote. Yes, you can text people, and yes, you can drive them to the polls. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I want to check and see whether or not we have any questions that have come in, Manuela, as we wind down. Not sure if we do. Let us know if we do have any questions or any comments that have come through. And in the meantime, Manuela, just let us know. And then in the meantime, I do want to remind folks again that you can reach out to NACA at census at baji.org. Let's do a round of the social media handles so that we make sure that people have that before we go to our questions. I'm going to go in reverse order. So I'm going to start in terms of our guests with Insay. Insay, how do people reach out and follow a New Georgia Project?
So we're at New Georgia Project on social media across many, many platforms. So on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok, and on YouTube. You can go there to see our awful rap parodies and me struggle through many viral dance crazes. This is what I do for the people. No, I'm kidding. But yes, follow us with New Georgia Project across all of our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Mena, how do folks follow you, follow CBC Foundation, just keep a hold of the Black folks on the federal level? How do we do that?
Yes, so hashtag CBCFINC. Of course, if you just Google Congressional Black Caucus Foundation or go to www.cbcfinc.org, you can find out what we're doing with our partnership with Fair Count. If you type in Black America Counts, you will be able to trace our map that Dr. Abrams-McClain referred to and get a fact sheet for each state across the country, and gives you a really good idea of sort of where the hard hit areas are for organizers, enumerators, people tuning in to take that information and empower themselves. So, come be part of the change you want to see. Big ups to BAJI. You guys are doing amazing work. And there are a lot. It's important that we all kind of know that there are outlets, demystify the idea that there's no place to start. This work is being done. It's in progress. So don't reinvent the wheel. Just put some nice gold rims on it and join somebody who's already doing it.
Absolutely. I like the gold rims. Janine, how do folks follow you?
Rims. This is great. I want to do that. Yes, you can follow Fair Count at Fair Count at Fair Count on Twitter and Instagram, and at Fair Count Georgia on Facebook. If you want to get involved, again, there's still time to get involved. We have 2 programs. You can go to sistersforthecensus.org, and that is our Black Women Power, making sure that we get our kids and our families counted. So that's sistersforthecensus.org. and then blackmencount.org. Black men are one of the most undercounted groups in historically in the census. And so I was very adamant that it was not African American men count. I was like, we calling it Black Men Count. Everybody get counted. So that is blackmencount.org.
Thank you so very much. Yes, you were very adamant. Every meeting we went to, all kinds of meetings, people would say African-American and Janine would be Black. Don't forget our migrant siblings. You don't get to forget. And so we really appreciate that. Appreciate also the National Urban League and the folks at the National Black Census Roundtable, our sister Jerry Green, our brother Dr. Memorial, and just really impressed with all the work that they've been doing. Our sister Dr. Claire Nelson, the founder of the Caribbean American Heritage Month, want to make sure that we thank her because she's really been pushing on behalf of the Caribbean folks in this country. We have so many groups focusing on so many different areas. Jerry Hopkins doing work with Caribbean folks both in New York and in Florida, and actually really nationally, trying to make sure that our folks are counted. I want to thank, as Nika did, our civic engagement coordinators. They've been wonderful as well. And let's see. Oh, we do have a question. Okay, Amanuela, let's go.
Thank you. Our question is from Nikki L. And it says, thank you for this wonderful presentation. My question is, how do I encourage first and second generations of Black immigrant friends and family in mid-sized urban New England cities and towns to vote? They're not hired, spoken to in towns with increasing Black population. That lack of outreach is overtly observed in the schools where a majority of Black students are of immigrant backgrounds. And this is for all panelists, so feel free to jump in.
Feel free to jump in. I don't know, Nsé, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. I'll just say how we train our organizers. And this might sound very basic, but you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And so we listen to people. Folks will tell you what their hopes are and their dreams are, their fears are for themselves, for their families, and for their communities. And then we go about training folks to connect what they've told you they care about with the act of voting. Right? So if somebody tells you, like, I actually am really concerned about the quality of education that my students, that my children or the children in my community are getting, then, do you know who's on the school board? Do you know how closely they represent the interests of folks who share your position? They're building a new landfill in our community, and like all the kids in our community now have asthma, right? So is there a public service commission, or is this a city council or a county council decision, figuring out who is responsible for the pain that you're experiencing and who you can partner with to stop that? And so, yeah, so we listen. I would start there.
I just want to couple what Nsé said with the pragmatic part, right? Because for those of us tuning in, like we get what she just mentioned, right? Why these important issues affect us critically. But we have to be real about the challenges everyday people have. Transportation, kids to take care of, right? This is, and you can put on top of that the voting restrictive rights that over 30 some states have employed after Obama's tenure that we're facing. So we talk about free and fair election observers in other countries, but arguably we have a lot of work to do within our own place, like polls and all of that. People have ailments. They don't have the ability to do that. So let's rest on, the realities of our communities, right? And we know in the Black community, souls to the polls, right? If you're part of a faith-based institution or not, be that change you want to see, like even within your family. Like, did everyone in your family who's eligible to vote? Maybe you ought to just do a little family event and literally drive people there, because a lot of it is coordination, it's prioritization. People have burdens. Elections day is not a federal holiday. It should be, but it's not. And so people have real challenges. And so it's easy to make the case why it's important, but for people to be able to have a realistic chance to actually go to the polls and vote, really means that we have to meet our communities where they are and provide them with opportunities to vote. Schedule it, make a date, walk. You know, we're facing some critical challenges with all the things that are happening right now. And so I can't emphasize enough, the over-reliance on the absentee process is going to be critical that we get it right. And to the extent that we feel safe enough to go in person and vote, you know, we encourage that. But we are facing a global pandemic, and these issues disproportionately affect our community. So we have to have a collective approach to voting, not just each person voting, but how are we collectively helping our community grow, you know, vote together.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's really important that we make this an inside out function as well, right? That we look at, you know, are we voting, and then who are we taking that's close to us, and then how are we making this a bigger issue? How are we taking it to the places that we congregate, that we're in social space, whether that be spiritual, religious space, whether that be your sorority or the team maybe that you play on the weekends, or where are we taking this and how do we take it, and making sure that it's connected to those folks that are most impacted. Thank you so very much. Really appreciate this conversation. Appreciate you sisters joining and giving us all this excellent information. I want to thank Amanuela. Thank you so very much, Amanuela, for making it happen on the back end. Really appreciate you. Thank you, Nikesa, always, the magician, for helping us to make sure that we pulled together everything that we needed to pull together to make this be as helpful to our communities as possible. Thank you, Neka, for all the work you're doing with our civic engagement work. And we want to thank Veronica. We want to thank Jonathan, Karis, Mark, better not forget anybody, Claire, Ava, Carol, thank all of you for the work that you're doing across the country to be able to do the work that we need to do here. And then I want to thank all of you that joined us, Janine, Mena, Inse. Very important to hear your voices. Thank you so much for adding to this. Folks, if you want to get in touch with BAJI, follow us. You see this information here on the screen. You can contact us by email at info@baji.org. You can go to our website at baji.org. You can follow us on Twitter at BAJI Tweet, on Facebook, facebook.com/BAJI page, and on Instagram at InstaBAJI. You know, we have all kinds of IG lives that happen throughout the month on our Instagram, so make sure definitely to check in there. We share a lot of information on all of our social media platforms, and you can get some good basic information about BAJI and the work that we're doing on our website. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful week. Don't let this day end without you and at least 4 other people being registered to vote. Appreciate you so much. Have a great, wonderful day. Bye, folks. Thank you.